We're the Pennsylvania Municipal League, and our mission is to strengthen, empower, and advocate for effective local government in Pennsylvania. So we're an advocate for local government. Our services run the gamut from insurance trust to training to legislative advocacy, all on behalf of municipalities in Pennsylvania.
The Pennsylvania Municipal League represents cities and boroughs of all sizes, townships. We all have common interests in being able to see laws that will help us enacted at Harrisburg. And we work together across party lines. Doesn't matter how many people you represent. We look for ways to help have state government help local government.
Pensions are a big issue. Public safety is the cost of public safety, and pensions relates to that, are big issues in municipalities. You want to have the best public safety, best fire and policemen that you can possibly have. Well, that costs money, and so you've got to balance those, what your complements with what you can afford.
The number 1, 2, and 3 issues right now with the state, with cities, is municipal pension reform. We simply can't afford to be able to pay the pension obligations that we have without common sense reform coming from the state. Cities and municipalities and townships and boroughs don't have the legal rights to change the rules that are established by the state when it comes to municipal pensions. So we need a partnership with the state to be able to assure that all of our workers receive those pensions, but also assure that there are rules in place that we can pay for them.
We're in very need of the state's assistance to help us have the needed pension reform. We've worked with a number of legislators as well as the governor's office to draft legislation that could be acceptable and worked with our unions. And we're very close. We're very close, and we're hopeful that people will see the need for this. This will help right the ship for many of our municipalities. I mean, we need that be able to have those tools at home, if you will, to really correct some of the issues around municipal pension. And that's probably the biggest issue. That keeps us all sort of hamstrung. There's only so many dollars that can go around. And property tax reform is right up there with it as well.
Right now, our only because we're in arbitration with our fire department, I know that is a W-2 average of $93,000 a year. That's not sustainable for a city our size. For example, it's determined, most cities say that real estate taxes should pay your public safety budget, police and fire. My police and fire budget is over $20 million. My real estate tax revenue is about $8.6 million. It's not sustainable.
Act 111 is a binding arbitration law for public safety personnel in Pennsylvania. In other words, if you can't come to an agreement with the public safety unions, you go to binding arbitration. We think it's one of the biggest cost drivers in any full-service municipality in Pennsylvania. We'd really like to put some parameters around that via the legislative process. It's very difficult when you're talking about police and fire, but we really think it's morphed to the other side and is now costing municipalities a lot more than it really should. And it's sort of the purpose of it we understand, but the purpose is being defeated. Because police and fire can't strike, they've got to go. So we understand that there has to be binding arbitration, but we think there has to be parameters put around that. The ability to pay, what's fair, what's been on the table. I think all those things need to come into play.
Act 111 is very important to local government because it really directs how we're able to negotiate our pension contracts with our service providers like the police and the fire. And it came from a time, it's I think almost 50 years old, and it came from a time when police were not given very high salaries, and fire certainly not. But now it does sort of institutionalize a pretty favored. They're sort of favored in terms of their negotiations in ways that really can be harmful to the budgets of all of our municipalities. And it has developed that they've become really it's a difficult negotiation under the terms of Act 111, and sometimes the approved contracts are just extremely burdensome and create budgetary problems that have to defund very important other programs.
Pensions are mandated by the Commonwealth. They tell us what your benefit levels can be in municipalities in Pennsylvania. And so when this Act 111 process kicks in, the collective bargaining process, obviously police and fire and all personnel want to have the best pensions there can be, and we understand that. So pensions can be a huge number. The minimum municipal obligation that must be put in as those costs go up, if you have market fluctuations, it's all on the municipality. There's no sharing of that risk with the public safety personnel. And so we think that needs to change too.
Pension legacy costs are really expensive for all of Pennsylvania cities as well as the state. And those legacies costs, in my term, started 2008. We were paying $1.2 million in our mandatory municipal obligation. Today we're paying $5.2. A $4 million increase over 8 years, which is totally unsustainable for a city of our size. So with the general fund budget of $35 million and $5 million of that going to pensions legacy costs, it's not sustainable, and we need the legislature to act. We need pension reform. And we're not talking about current employees. Those current employees came on, they earned that pension. We're talking about stop the bleeding. Put everybody in a new pension plan that gets hired, let's say after January 1, 2018. Everybody's in a 401k or a hybrid like I'm in. I'm in the PMRS plan in the city of Easton. I get 1% of my salary per year times the number of years I've worked. So a person like myself, they're 20 years, are going to get 20% of their salary. That 20% is totally different than the 70% that police or fire would get.
What kind of an impact does that have on a municipality's ability to provide basic services to the community?
Clearly, what happens is either you're going to have, more than likely, you'll have less public safety personnel, less police because you can't afford the ones you have, even though you may have a need for more. Your parks and recreation, your public works personnel all feel that impact because equipment doesn't get changed, parks and rec don't get upgraded because of all these pension costs that you're facing.
Pensions are a very big part of it. Our MMO has gone up 3 times what it was when I first started in office 12 years ago. It's a significant part of our budget now, almost 25% of our budget. And that's a big hindrance to being able to maintain safety and services at the level we're at because that's all personnel driven. So it's a very big challenge. It's a very big challenge for every city in Pennsylvania and probably in America.
I'd like to see some modification where there's a sharing of the risk between the employer and the employee on pensions. We'd like to see benefits somewhat modified so that new personnel coming in, we don't want to take anything away from any existing personnel, but we would like to get these new hires and bring them in under a new tier where we can have some more of this sharing of the risk. And I think on the Act 111 process, we'd just like to see some fairness. Right now, there's 3 arbitrators. The neutral arbitrator, supposedly neutral, is totally paid for by the municipality. We think that cost needs to be shared. So some things like that would be very helpful. We think there's evidentiary hearings associated with that process. We think they ought to be sunshined. We think everyone ought to know what's being asked for it and what we're offering.
Municipal pension reform is not something that gets people on their feet going nuts. When the mayor had the Stanley Cup champs, you probably didn't lead your rally with, hey guys, I need your help to reform municipal pensions. And we get that, right? I mean, the big problem with this issue is it's hard to get the public's attention other than this. If we don't fix it, you're going to have to lay off cops, or you're going to have to raise taxes, or you're going to have to do both. And my big concern, and hopefully it proves out to be wrong, is that the state would tackle state pensions and not do municipal pensions at the same time, thus putting that off for far too long. Because of the stock market rise, the problem appears in the short run to not be getting worse. Okay? The last time we had a stock market run like this, the state and most cities were over 100% funded. Now, after this unprecedented stock market run, and we could get in, I don't want to get into tax rates and Trump and all that other stuff. I mean, just from the fact of it, from 2009 to now, it is an unprecedented stock market run. Which means at some point we're due for a correction. And I'm not on CNBC's Squawk Box, and I'm not an expert on the bull-bear market cycle. I'm not here to pretend to be. I just know enough about history to know that there's a downturn coming. And if the last time the downturn came and caused major problems, the cities and state were at 100% funding, what happens now when we have most of our cities between 40 and 70% funded? which is where a pretty big chunk. And we also have a problem waking the public up to this issue, and Harrisburg to a degree, is because when you see the unfunded liability of the state pensions, that number, 40 billion, 50 billion just grabs you. As opposed to when it's just city X or city Y and it's 10 million, it doesn't seem as grabbing, other than when you combine the unfunded pension liability in Pennsylvania, it is $10 billion. 10 billion. The number one job, as you know, in local government is public safety. The number one cost in your budgets is public safety. And you are mandated to make these pension payments, which means something's going to have to give if we don't fix this before the next stock market correction. And we've all had to run for office. Who likes asking their voters for higher taxes? It's not something you want to do. Maybe at time to time it may be necessary, but you don't want to do it. The only way to head off massive property tax increases or creating less safe communities is to fix this. I just want to let you know here from the League of Cities perspective that as the Auditor General, myself, I will campaign with you to try to get that over the finish line. Because, no. It may not be the opening line at the high school pep rally that, but I know that if we want to create a more sustainable Pennsylvania and have our cities that are doing so, you go into almost any city right now in Pennsylvania. What's happening, and I sometimes people think like I'm shilling for York and Pittsburgh because of, being my two homes, but it's not just those two cities. Go Erie, with the things that are happening in our cities are tremendous. And I love cities. It's great for our Commonwealth, and it's what many young professionals want today, is good cities where they can live, walk to work. They want that. But whether they know it or not, this issue of municipal pension reform is critical to keeping that momentum going.
Municipal government is very expensive. We have some challenges with regard to nonprofits being central in the inner cities. Some of the financial things that are facing all of the cities. Same challenges for all of us: blighted properties, people leaving the core communities to move out to the suburbs. And we've been working very hard to try and reverse some of those trends. And we're starting to see some of the fruits of that work. And I think it'll get much better in the future.
We have to get permission from the state legislature for all of our revenue sources. Any taxation that we want to, anything else. And so we are struggling with working only with property tax and earned income tax. We used to have a business privilege tax, but that was taken. We dropped it and it was taken away. There's no more amusement tax to employ. So we're hurting.
Within Washington, there's bills that people usually don't even think about the tax eligibility of municipal bonds that will end up raising your taxes if they're changed as Congress is proposing. There's the issues that people care deeply about, whether it's the delivery of health care and how it comes through a state level and then through our own counties. But there are other issues such as whether or not we're adequately funding our infrastructure. Our roads are the things we don't see, like our sewers and water lines. And if they're not happening at the federal level, that only means they're increasing the costs at the local level.
When you shift $54 billion in domestic programs into the military, and I'm for protecting our borders and having a safe country, but it's going to affect lives. It's going to affect people in towns across America. Cutting programs for homeless shelters, for affordable housing, for food pantries. These are real cuts that we need to work on. And that's a lot of money that's coming out of programs that help each and every one of you in your cities. You can't cut funding across the board and expect cities to make do. You can't cut CDBG to zero and essentially take community development funding out of communities that need it the most. And you can't slash public safety funding, including millions from community policing. And you can't eliminate programs like home assistance and the Tiger Grants, which have helped cities of all sizes build critical infrastructure transportation. So let's talk about this a little bit more. And that's what they're trying to do. It's a $54 billion clawback from local communities. We're going to bear the brunt of those cuts. So it's up to each and every one of you to say no. We're not going to stand for it. We've got an action kit that can assist and help all of you. You can go to our website, and if you just take one thing away from my remarks, just write down this website. It's just nlc.org. That's the National League of Cities website. There's a plethora of resource of information on there. But as it relates to how this federal budget might impact your cities, go to our website, nlc.org/fightthecuts. And let's make your voice be heard. We have toolkits there, sample press releases, material about this to help you understand it. And it's an easy way for local leaders to work with their federal government. And that's also what we're doing with our telecom working group. NLC is working to make sure that the FCC listens to local concerns, including broadband expansion and the protection of rights. NLC recommended to a diverse group of local leaders to serve on the FCC's Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee working group, and to make sure that the voice of local government is heard as they look at federal policy around there. And you probably already heard a lot about tax reform recently. NLC is sending a clear message to Congress and to the administration. Tax reform cannot double taxing American families, and cannot limit tools that cities use to build infrastructure and strengthen their communities. So what do I mean by double taxing? I'll just talk about my city in Cleveland. We are in the process of rebuilding our school system and really pulling it out of the darkest part it's ever been. And in the past 6 years, we've passed 2 levies, one an operating levy and one a capital levy. And many people in our city were more comfortable in passing a tax levy because they knew they were going to get that federal tax exemption as a result of that. So we have skin in the game, and now what we have historically had, the federal government is thinking about eliminating. And so we can't double tax Americans. This also includes preserving the tax exempt status of municipal bonds. 78% of all the roads in America are owned and operated by local governments. And for the state and local tax deduction, in DC they're calling it SALT, state and local tax deduction, 1,770,000 tax filers claim the SALT deduction in Pennsylvania alone. So we definitely need to fight for that. Whatever is on the president's agenda week to week, or our priorities aren't going away, because we have to balance our budgets. They're always going to be there. Because cities are facing real challenges, and it's not just politics. You've got entire industries that are hurting and jobs that are disappearing, but the federal government isn't helping. And you've got infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt, or needs to be built or rebuilt, and yet there's no action in Congress. And our local economies are struggling, and they need jobs and opportunities that are open to everyone. We're facing tough challenges in Washington, and Washington seems to be stuck in these endless arguments and politics. And that's why we need cities to lead. Leaders lead. Each and every one of you, you're a leader. And so our citizens are looking to each and every one of us for some direction on how we can move America forward. We've got to educate Washington about the realities we face in our hometowns and why we need funding for city priorities. So let's talk about some of the challenges we're facing. Our economy is changing, which means our workforce needs to adapt to new technologies so cities continue to power the nation's economy. We've got a $2 trillion infrastructure deficit that's holding us back economically. The American Society for Civil Engineers did a thorough analysis of the country's infrastructure and said we would need $2 trillion just by 2020 to keep it to just a satisfactory level. That isn't even beyond 2020. So we really need to get that funding mechanism worked out. And we're also in the middle of the worst drug epidemic in the history. You heard our Attorney General DePasquale talk about the opioid challenge. Opioids and heroin claim the lives of almost 150 Americans per day. And in my hometown of Cleveland, we've been really hit hard. You know, drug dealers are now disguising elephant tranquilizers or carfentanil or as OxyContin pills. And this stuff is so dangerous that a dose can, the size of salt can kill you. And I know Pennsylvania has been hit hard too. And we know this isn't cheap, which is why we need federal partners to support our efforts. This is the greatest public health challenge of our generation, and we all have a role to play in it, but we also have a role into finding solutions. Cities are in the businesses of creating solutions, and as you know all too well here in Pennsylvania, when local leaders have the resources they need, cities thrive. And that's our mission at the National League of Cities. We have a seat at the table when Washington debates these issues, and we're here to represent your needs, but we need your help. So let's look at this handsome gentleman up there on the screen. You know your members of Congress, you know your senators, and you already know that when you call, they pick up. So I don't have to tell you all about, you have a real voice when it comes to federal politics. Mayor Sal Panto of Easton knows this all too well. As the chair of National League of Cities Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Advocacy Committee, Mayor Panto testified on Capitol Hill, on brownfields, on what cities need from the federal government to help our communities clean up these older legacy cities and to keep them healthy. He did a great job testifying, but there's something that all of you can do to help us with these big fights ahead. And we're going to need each and every one of your help. City leaders across America are on the front line, and the Pennsylvania Municipal League has some of the strongest municipal leaders in our country. Many leaders are concerned about the potential impacts that tax reform is going to have on local cities, towns, and villages across America. You know, we own 78% of all the roads in America, but yet we're not getting our level of funding back from Washington into our communities. As Congress looks to reauthorize and look at they're calling it SALT, state and local tax. It's an acronym that many people in DC are using. How will this affect our communities? Not only cities, but school districts. Many of our communities have voluntarily put forth levies to raise their income tax because they knew they would get a federal tax exemption. Now Congress is thinking about doing away with it. So it's going to have big effects, and we're watching it closely, and hopefully we'll be able to win on this front. But there's bipartisan support to support the city's position, so we'll see where it goes.
Another topic we're working on is local use of radar. Pennsylvania is the only state that doesn't allow local radar. This is a public safety issue, and we're hoping to see action in the Senate very soon, and then to work on getting this legislation through the House. This is an issue that has been around for many, many years, as you all know. We're getting closer than we ever have, though, on the issue. We have Senate Bill 251. This legislation actually passed the Senate last session in the very final days of the session, and the House really didn't have time to take it up. It was literally 1 or 2 days of session left. It's important to local government because local officials are the ones to hear complaints about speeding in their communities. It is truly a public safety issue, and for local governments to be allowed to use radar to patrol speeding and to preserve public safety is important and really something that should have been done many years ago. As appointed and elected officials, you are on the scene every day. You know what's happening in your communities. You can provide the facts and figures and personal stories that I cannot provide working on a statewide level. So it's important that you talk to your House and Senate members regularly, provide them with feedback and information about the topics that we're working on in Harrisburg, and to continue just to communicate and have a dialogue with them so that when something very important comes up that we need your help with, you've already established communication with them and you have facts and figures and information to provide. And that will help that helps your House and Senate members make the decisions that you need them to make.
My theory is you can't do economic development without community development. So all of the projects that they're working on, from better trash pickup to beautification and streetscapes and events for people to do, all lead to a better economic development climate. So it's important to do the little things.
Okay. Tell us, if you would, when companies are looking at communities for investment, what are the things they're looking for, and what can communities and mayors do to enhance their opportunities to be able to attract businesses?
Today, the thing that I hear the most is workforce. You know, everybody's looking for incentives or a package, but you have to have a community where people want to live, and they're the ones that are being successful in recruiting business and industry. You know, if you can have a place where millennials have a place to go out, have a good time after work, and you can attract talent. If you can attract talent, you can attract business.
Most of our communities across America, it's not cities competing in the global arena, it's regions. So my advice to the leaders of the Pennsylvania Municipal League is they have to work within clusters and within regions, because it's the north east cluster, including Pittsburgh as the powerhouse, competing against Dubai and Shanghai. It's not Pittsburgh by themselves. They need all the other communities around them. Likewise, down in the south and the southeast with the Philadelphia region, they need to come together and work with across municipal borders for the betterment of economic development.
The Supreme Court has a very significant impact on local governments generally, and this term in particular promises to be big for local governments. And second, the Supreme Court is really at a crossroads, having a new member and possibly losing other members in the future. So it's an interesting time to be considering what's happening with the court. There's a couple of general reasons why the Supreme Court is of interest to cities. Namely, when partisan politics slow down in Washington, the Supreme Court keeps on going. Even though the court only had 8 justices over the last term, still decided 62 cases. Its average is probably closer to 70. And the court also, for your purposes, decides a significant number of cases involving cities. So think about the docket as about 70 cases. Probably in 5 or 6, maybe 7 of those cases, a city is a named party. And then in a couple other cases, there's a direct impact on cities, even though they're not named. So the court is also often deciding cases of constitutional significance. And the only way the Constitution can get changed is through a very elaborate process that hasn't been engaged in decades. So there's a couple reasons why the Supreme Court is particularly important right now. In the last couple of years, of course, the court has decided many important and interesting issues of the day. For example, is the Affordable Care Act constitutional? Is same-sex marriage constitutional? And this term, the court has a number of very big cases as well. Is partisan gerrymandering constitutional? And I'm going to talk more about this case later. Are public sector fair share laws constitutional as well? And finally, hopefully this term, the Supreme Court is going to be deciding a case that will determine whether or not Quill, which is the law or the Supreme Court precedent that says state and local governments cannot force out-of-state retailers to collect sales tax, the court hopefully will decide whether or not this law is constitutional. So the Supreme Court right now, I would say, it's fair to say, is at a crossroads. We currently have a 5-4 court with Justice Kennedy in the middle. And also we have a new justice, which I'm going to talk about at length. We have many, many older justices, including Justice Kennedy. We have an unpredictable and unconventional president. And as you know, the Supreme Court, or the Congress rather, I guess I should say more specifically the Senate, exercised the nuclear option to get Justice Gorsuch on the court, meaning now we only need 51 votes to get a new Supreme Court justice on the court. So here's the demographics of our current court. And you see a star next to Justice Kennedy's name because he's really considered the swing justice in many regards. And you see again presented a 5-4 court. But I have to dig a little bit deeper into that. The court is really only 5-4 in the big cases. About 45% of the cases the Supreme Court decides are unanimous, which is quite difficult to believe. And about 20% of the decisions are actually 5-4. Regardless of your personal politics, where you're personally a liberal or personally a conservative, I would say conservative justices and moderate justices are often good for cities in particular areas: employment, qualified immunity, federalism, preemption in theory. And they're not so good on land use decisions. The right has completely taken the position that private property owners should be able to do whatever they want, and the Supreme Court justices are no exception, the conservative ones in general. Conservatives tend to be more skeptical about taxes and the ability of governments to raise them. And I have an asterisk next to free speech. There's no judge on the Supreme Court that thinks you don't have a broad right to free speech. And the reality is, the people shutting down free speech are local governments and state governments, and sometimes the federal government. So the asterisk is like, there's no judge on the Supreme Court that doesn't like free speech. Regardless of what your personal politics are, conservatives tend to, overall, conservatives and moderates tend to be pretty good for local governments, and we currently have a court that leans in those directions. But every case is, of course, different and has different implications. But in general, I would say the court is mixed to favorable for local governments at this point.
Pennsylvania Municipal League has a program called the Business Leaders Network. This is the highest level that business partners can make to the league, and they're actually investing in the league and its future, and they're connected year-round to our organization through meetings and functions, seminars and events, and they're true partners, and that's why we value our business leaders.
Well, I've been working with the league for a number of decades, actually, and it's always been a great association. When the Business Leaders Network was created, we took advantage of the opportunities, the exposure to responsible officials from around the state. We're a firm that really understands, I think, government, and so it's a natural place for us to be. And I've gotten tremendous enjoyment and professional satisfaction out of the association. Business Leaders Network is a very valuable tool for us.
We have over 20 business leaders, and this is an annual commitment that they make. And the value in that is that these are top-notch professionals from a variety of firms, many of whom are in the municipal marketplace. They bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to help local officials deal with a wide range of problems. Now, of course, many of them are in the business to try to sell a product or service to municipalities, but whether they do or not, they have an opportunity to interact with local leaders and help them solve problems, and that's what it's all about.
Blackford Adventures has been a member of the Business Leaders Network for some time. We really value it because it allows us to intersect with members across the Commonwealth. Municipalities, of course, have the right and privilege to sell off assets if they so choose, if they're in a short-term cash position. We're offering an alternative to that where they can keep their asset and generate some cash as well. So it's a sale-leaseback or a lease-leaseback where the property never transitions from their ownership. If they sell off a key structural investment or asset like a sewer system or a water system, in some cases they lose control of those future rates. So a lease-leaseback would allow them to generate the cash in the short term, but it allows them to hold on to that asset and control the rates.
I am a member of the Business Leaders Network, and our session today is about the National League of Cities Service Line Warranty Program. We would partner with the municipality in order to make our program available to their residents, and we provide homeowners with optional protection on their external water lines, external sewer lines, and in-home plumbing. And we do that at absolutely no cost to the municipality, and they would actually receive a revenue for participating. We have over 450 municipal partners across the United States. We do have 24 partners here across the state of Pennsylvania, and we've saved over 140,000 residents over $90 million across the U.S.
Constellation Energy is a proud member of the Pennsylvania Municipal League's Business Leaders Network. Our presentation today is going to be on sustainability, sustainable Pennsylvania, and energy goals for communities. The communities can take opportunities to do projects like improving streetlights, improving lights at City Hall, helps with public safety, and also makes the cities look better. Also through programs like purchasing renewable energy credits, they can help meet sustainability goals for their constituencies. The Business Leaders Network is extremely valuable to Constellation. We really cherish our relationship we have with the League and the ability it gives us to interface with our membership.
Our firm's a member of the Business Leaders Network, and the value we find in just talking and networking with elected officials is fantastic. We're auditors and consultants, so we come in, we help you with your annual audit, but what we have the ability to do, because we work with just nonprofits and governmental entities, is that we can share best practices among all those municipalities to make us all better. To be able to connect on both a business level and a personal level with the officials here is so valuable to our firm as a whole, and actually to me, because these people really care about their communities, and I find that it just makes me excited to be around them.
I'm here with Sustainable Pittsburgh on behalf of the Sustainable Pennsylvania program, where we work with municipalities across the state on increasing their policies and practices of sustainability. We've had an excellent response over the last number of years. We have 77 municipalities registered and certified across the state. We have another 18 pledged to be certified across the state, and that represents a population of about 2.95 million people. Sustainable Communities certification is it's essentially a series of questions. They have 131 criteria that we ask municipalities if they're enacting those policies or working on those policies or practices or operations, and it's not time bound, and they are able to receive credit for the policies and practices that they put in place. The advantages of being sustainable inherently are you'll have essentially a more thriving community, because you're going to have your finances in place, your better economic development, and you're going to also pay attention to the social needs of your people. That's at its core. Now, the certification itself benefits people because they get recognition for the services that they provided. They are able to see, they get a benchmarking checklist of where they are at and where they're able to go. So it gives them a greater ability to provide for their citizens.
We would most definitely welcome more businesses to participate in the Business Leaders Network. They can visit our website at pml.org or give us a call, and we'll be happy to give them the details. Our website also contains the detailed list of benefits for the business leaders. One of those benefits is to be connected to our board of directors. One of our business leaders actually serves on the board, and then they're all invited to participate in events such as this annual summit and other events throughout the year.
Internet of Things is really driven by the vast amount of connectivity that now exists around the country, whether it's wireless technology through cell phones or connectivity through Wi-Fi networks. As I said, we have 18 million Wi-Fi hotspots across the Comcast footprint, 1 million of them in Pennsylvania, which is creating a web of connectivity. And from a consumer side, what that means, and everyone in this room lives this, what that means is that you're connecting more and more devices more and more frequently when they are not connected by a wire into a wall. I'll just ask you to think about how many times you're going on the internet, whether it's checking email, surfing websites, doing even video conferencing, and how many times are you doing this on a device where a wire is coming out of the device and being plugged into the wall. 10 years ago, that would have been 95% of the time. Today, it might be 5% of the time. And I meet plenty of people who never work off of a device that is actually plugged into the wall. So that's coming from this vast amount of connectivity. And now what's beginning to happen is the translation of that connectivity to benefit cities, creating so-called smart cities programs, so that so many of the functions that cities can do can now be aided by technology, where you get an improved performance by the city at a reduced cost, sort of the holy grail, if you will, of city services. So think traffic light control, traffic control. Now, you don't have to use pre-programmed methods. You can use technologically engineered algorithms that help to control your traffic lights, maybe have a different flow during rush hour than during the middle of the day, and it can be adjusted centrally based on actual traffic patterns, which your engineers sitting in a room can see on cameras that are seeing what traffic patterns are like, and you can adjust traffic signals, water meters, parking meters. All of these can now be controlled, and the services that cities are delivering can be enhanced through technology and through devices connected to the internet. Waste collection and recycling. Comcast sponsored a contest at the Pennovation Center, which is a University of Pennsylvania incubator accelerator lab, and there are 100 applicants. These are all students, graduate students. The winning technology was a sensor that cost less than $100 that can be implanted in bridges and that can give a constant monitoring based on vibrations as to when a bridge needs repair. So you don't have to inspect it every year or every 6 months. You plant a couple of these monitors. It's monitored remotely, can be monitored. You don't even need an office. You can monitor on a PC or a tablet. Somebody can just go and look at that every month, and every bridge in the city, you get an assessment of whether it needs repair. So these are the advances of the future. It is the true smart city. Comcast has a business that we've just started called Machine Q, where we would like to partner with cities and work with cities in helping them to figure out how to take advantage of smart city technology and to more efficiently, using technology, deliver baseline and improved quality of services to their constituents.
So are these types of programs relevant right now for smaller municipalities? Is it affordable? Is it scalable? If you are representing a smaller community, what type of technology is off the shelf right now? Right. And what type of partnership should they be looking for in the future?
So right now, Comcast and others, to be fair, probably are more interested in larger cities because we're just starting. So we don't pretend to say we have all this figured out, and it is a matter of partnership. I mean, it is, what is most important to Pittsburgh, to Chicago, to Philadelphia, so that we could work on those. But as we develop these technologies, and we already have pretty good parking meter technology, we have this particular innovation for bridges. This technology is not expensive, so it's not something that is limited to only big cities that want to scale out hundreds or thousands of these kind of devices. Once the technology is there, it's easily available and affordable to smaller municipalities and cities. And we're certainly wide open to partnering with the smallest of our cities in our footprint to try and work with them and begin to bring them the technology innovations that have been developed, are available, and will be scalable and useful at the small municipality level. I think a smart city today is a connected city and a city that is positioned to take advantage of technology and the connectivity of Wi-Fi and cell networks to be able to deliver more efficient services in a more efficient manner.
And how would that work? Give us some examples.
So an example, by way of example, you can have smart parking meters, smart traffic lights for traffic control within the city. You can use technology to help assess the quality of your roads and your bridges. And when repairs might need to be made, you can use technology to help re-engineer trash collection routes, snow plowing routes. And these are all things that have been done or can be done by people, but now you can use technology to do it less expensively and more accurately.
The Pennsylvania Municipal League provides a lot of educational resources and opportunities to learn about local government. That's very valuable, particularly to our newly elected officials. Those of us who've been in office for a while also have a tendency to pick up a new trade or learn something new as well. I brought with me a couple of newly elected officials from the city of York. I'm glad they are taking advantage of this opportunity. The Pennsylvania Municipal League has been a wealth of resource for me, in particular, and other elected officials I know of in the city of York, teaching us the nuances of government in many cases, how to approach our legislators, and the networking, of course, and realizing that many of the same issues that we're facing here in our city, if you will, they're facing them as well in their city. So we're not in it alone.
Seminar here today is talk about cybersecurity and how it affects businesses, not only for the taxpayers, but other businesses out there, whether they're small businesses, large businesses. It's a giant threat in the community today, and you see it on your cell phones, you see it on your laptops, your desktops, whatever it may be. It affects everybody, not just businesses.
What is the best thing that municipalities can do to protect themselves and their vital data?
The best thing that a business can do or a municipality is to partner with a company that's very good at keeping track of all the threats that are coming out today and different things that they can do to take care of those.
Our workshop today is called Labor Law Potpourri. We go through all the latest issues in labor law that are important to municipal employers in Pennsylvania regarding police sustainability, public services sustainability, contract negotiations, all the labor law negotiations that are impacting municipalities in our state from the national level, the Affordable Care Act developments, Fair Labor Standards Act. We talk about appropriate training of employees and elected officials, especially what we're seeing in Washington when we talk about appropriate usage of social media, when we talk about texting, tweeting, posting, Facebook, all of that, and much more is what we're talking about in our Labor Law Potpourri seminar. You want to avoid any kind of discrimination or lawsuits, and you want to treat all your employees fairly. So you want to do that, of course, and you want to train all your employees too, not to cause liability. And we all see in the news today, for example, inappropriate use of social media when it comes to any employees, whether public sector or private sector, that causes liability or causes embarrassment to a municipality. Just treating your employees fairly, managing your employees fairly, and training employees to not only do a good job, but avoid areas of harassment or any kind of liability. One thing we're talking about also is one example is distracted driving policies. We see too many people on the road today with phones and causing horrible potential liability, and we're training, again, we're re-emphasizing training with all our employees on avoiding any liability with that, and avoiding staying off phones and technology when they're driving our municipal vehicles, and hopefully their private vehicles too.
I'll be talking about my experience as a real-life captain of the Coast Guard ship during the perfect storm, but while it's an interesting story, the message is about leadership, teamwork, decision-making, and risk management, which are universal principles that everyone can use. In a situation that was beyond your control, you knew you had to make a difficult decision, but you didn't like any of your options? Or have you ever been part of a group that you knew had to come together as a team and act with a single focus if there was any chance for you to accomplish your goal? Now, if your answer is yes, you have an idea of what it's like to be in the perfect storm. Now, your decisions may not mean the difference between life and death, and they're certainly not going to create the additional revenue that you need out of thin air, but they can make the difference between providing affordable housing for families, seniors, singles that are within walking distance of amenities like playgrounds, parks, senior residences, and offering a level of service in schools that attract people to your communities, or having blighted neighborhoods that are not economical to rehab. Residents who are concerned for their safety and an exodus of people along with their tax revenue that you need to fix the problems that's causing them to leave. Now, who has read the book or seen the movie The Perfect Storm? The movie is a good depiction of the life of a commercial fisherman. It's given the U.S. Coast Guard tremendous exposure, and it's great entertainment. I know the gentlemen are not going to care, but ladies, this is the hand that shook the hand of George Clooney. The final question I'm asked most often is, why didn't we rescue the people on the fishing boat, the Andrea Gale? There was no call for help from the Andrea Gale. And if there had been, the Canadian Coast Guard would have responded, not the U.S. Coast Guard, because they were somewhere between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, about 700 miles from us. Let's see, at 3 miles per hour. These rescues took place in weather that's almost beyond imagination. They were successful because everyone was where he needed to be, doing what he needed to do, when he needed to do it. That's the power of a team acting with a single focus. Now, before I close, I want you to think about what you just heard. But I don't want you to think of it as just another scary Halloween story, because it isn't. It's about people like you who found themselves in a situation they couldn't control. They assessed the risk. They made difficult decisions when they didn't like their options, and they worked together extremely well as a team. Now, what challenges are you facing? You have to comply with unfunded mandates from the Commonwealth and the federal government while you try to maintain your autonomy and provide a level of services that your communities expect while simultaneously balancing your budget. And you have to balance the desires of the people who say no to everything with the people who can't say no to anything. You have to provide the leadership and build community all day, every day, as you encounter people at soccer games, shopping, or walking the dog. The public sector is unique Because when a recession hits, you can't trim down and cut the quarterly dividend like they can in the private sector. Demand for your services goes up as tax revenue goes down. And just like the perfect storm, all three have arrived in the same place at the same time. This has not produced the worst operating environment for municipalities in the last 100 years, but it does deserve your attention because you can never eliminate risk, but you can manage it. That will not guarantee success, but it can give you the confidence to go forward with your decisions, even in the most difficult of circumstances. When your annual summit is over, you return to work and jump back into your job with not only new ideas, but practical strategies on how to create and maintain a sustainable community so you can turn your vision into reality. I wish you success, and may you jump without incident. Every municipality is going to have their different problems, and things are going to pop up, and everyone's going to turn to them. So they have to know what the future is for their municipality and have to come up with their plan, and then they have to get people to make that happen.
What are the key elements to leadership in your estimation?
Well, you have to understand the situation, you have to know your people, and you have to know what you're trying to accomplish. And then you put all of that together and come up with your plan.
This morning, we want to recognize our 2017 Business Community Partnership Award recipient, Campbell, Durrant, Beatty, Palombo, and Miller. Would Executive Director Rick Schuettler and John McLaughlin and Pat Harvey from Campbell come forward for the presentation?
The program is now, we have almost 300 municipal members. We get over 500 people at our event in State, which we've held in State College for a number of years, 2.5 days of nothing but training. We have leveled the playing field on Act 111 and collective bargaining in this Commonwealth, and it's a tribute to this firm, Campbell, Durrant, Beatty, Palombo, and Miller. If you may recall, Pat and John were with Bauer Spar in the East. They merged this year, and it's gone, and the whole transition has been excellent, made the program stronger than ever. So they've been great partners and great friends to this municipal league for a long, long time. So, Pat, thank you very much. We appreciate it. You want to say something, Pat? Thank you.
For once in my life, I really don't have a speech other than to thank Rick, thank the league, thank the people that came before us, thank everybody remembers Bob Durrant and Bruce Campbell, and we hope to continue doing all the great work we're doing with all of you, and appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
Our annual high school essay contest featured the theme Civics and You, Your Key to Pennsylvania Local Government. Our online civics book at pml.org. The essay contest was designed to help make scholarships more affordable for students throughout Pennsylvania. Thank you to our distinguished 2017 panel of judges. Philip H. Klotz, Executive Director, the Pennsylvania Local Government Commission. Dr. G. Terry Madonna, Director, Center for Political and Political Affairs at Franklin and Marshall College. Rick Vilello, Deputy Secretary for Community Affairs and Development, the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development, who is with us today. Each judge read the essays submitted and ranked them based on how well they addressed the theme, Civics and You. We sincerely appreciate their continued support. Secretary Vilello and Rick Schuettler will join us for the presentations. We are pleased to announce this year's award winners. Our first place winner is Michelle Bauer, St. Mary's Area High School. St. Mary's manager Tim Pearson will join us for the presentation. Michelle's parents, Steve and Lisa Bauer, will accept on her behalf. I'd like to invite Steve and Lisa Bauer to the stage. This year's second place winner is Damian Ginchasso from Allentown Central Catholic High School, who is unable to be with us today. Congratulations to our award winners. You have bright futures ahead, and we certainly hope it includes local government.
Every year I get to give out the Easton Voting Award. It's been given out since Dr. George Smith was our mayor back in the late 50s. And it's really a credit to the community who gets this award because it's awarded to the member municipality who has the highest voter turnout. This year's Lower Borough and Lower Burrell had a 77% voter turnout. They're not here to accept this, but we'll make sure they get this award. 77% is an unreal number to me, because I don't think we've ever been over 35 or 40 in the last 10 years. So to Lower Burrell, how about a nice round of applause?
Our Commonwealth is a great place to live, work, and play, and this summit is a wonderful opportunity to share information and learn about programs that will make Pennsylvania even better. I want to take a moment to thank Erie Mayor Joe Sinnott for helping to host the summit, and Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto for presiding over the event. And of course, congratulations to your incoming president, Mayor Kim Bracey of York, and the incoming first vice president, Easton Mayor Sal Panto. Together, all of us share an important responsibility to the people in our communities. As governor, I have fought to improve education with schools that teach, and we have increased school funding by more than $800 million while implementing a fair funding formula. I have visited many of your municipalities on the Jobs That Pay tours to hear from business owners and hardworking Pennsylvanians about what we can do to help them thrive. And we're reforming state government to be fully accountable and transparent to the taxpayers. I know all of you are working equally hard in your communities to create government that works. Thank you for all that you do as elected and appointed officials. And before you leave Erie, I encourage you to enjoy the beautiful Bayfront. Thank you.
You're looking at the Bayfront of Erie. Obviously, this is one of our unique resources to this community. A lot of folks come here for fishing and water sports and things of that nature. Also ice fishing and things like that. So, you know, the waterfront means a lot to this community, and developing it and maximizing its potential is certainly a big part of what our future is, I believe. Not more than 25 years ago, this was all industrial down here. And as that started to change, we saw this as an opportunity. We decided we needed to develop this more for bringing people to the waterfront and really utilizing one of our largest resources, which is the bay and the lake. And so we started there. We have the convention center here on this site, a couple of hotels. The library is just a short distance away. Some other things are in process now with some of the larger parcels that are still undeveloped. But you have the marinas and restaurants and things of that nature, all of which brings people down to the waterfront. This has been going on for about a decade. We recognize that this is certainly our largest opportunity zone in the community for bringing new things and utilizing our waterfront. And so this is an ongoing project. There's still a couple of large parcels left to develop, but it's certainly the future of this community as far as tourism and some of the other things. The convention center has been a big part of the Bayfront. We've brought a lot of new things into this community, a lot of new people here to see this community for the first time. And once people come to see it, they come back. They bring their families on vacation and things of that nature. So we've had a lot of folks come back to the community after having been here once for something that was hosted at the convention center. Erie's an old manufacturing town, but of course we do have a tourism facet because of the beautiful Bayfront, the fishing, the water resources, things of that nature. So it does have a significant facet, albeit not the sole economic driver here in this community.
Local government probably touches your life as a citizen more than any other level of government. The parks that your children are going to, the police that come to protect you, are all functions of local government. And so we think folks need to recognize that. We want them to know that. That's part of what we're doing here. We also want to make those local governments be the most effective they can be. And a big part of what we're doing here is training, leadership, but also some nuts and bolts things so that our folks go back and know how to employ the best practices in all their communities.
I am encouraged. You know, we have a great group of mayors and council folks here that we've been working with for many years to work on some of these issues that are facing the communities in Harrisburg, where we really need to make the changes. Like I said, I've had a great experience working with them, and I think we're going to see a lot of good things in the future because this group can actually make things happen.
It's been great. We're really pleased to be in Erie in October. I think our folks can go away with a lot of new knowledge, a lot of things that are happening, not just on the legislative front. They learned some leadership skills. They've learned some nuts and bolts on other issues affecting local government, effective personnel management, things you should get involved with, things you shouldn't as elected officials. And so I think everybody goes back with a takeaway, and they can make their communities a better place to live.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
www.pml.org, and everything is there. And of course, call us, but go to the website. I think you can find anything you need.